Welcome! In this episode, we're going to continue building our budget application we started in the previous episode. If you haven't watched it yet, go check it out. This is where we left off after the first episode. We bound an Angular view to a list of budget items from a MongoDB, then returned to the front end by an express route. Now we're going to introduce functionality to add new items to the list, as well as save it to the database. We start off by adding some HTML to our Angular view. I created this HTML beforehand, but it's quite simple. Just another li containing two inputs, one for the item's description, the other for the item's amount. Let's see what this looks like in the browser. It looks pretty cool, but it doesn't do anything yet. To wire up functionality to these inputs, we start by adding some Angular attribute directives. The description is wired up to the description attribute of a variable on scope. We use Angular's ngKeyUp directive, so that we know when the user pressed enter on any of the fields. This will be our cue to start the adding logic. We do the same for the amount field, taking care to specify the amount attribute of the scope variable. Now we need to extend our controller to handle all the stuff that the view expects. First, we wire up an add function with the event as the parameter. Remember, we passed in the event from the ngKeyUp directive in the view. We also need to make a variable available on scope to make the ngModel directives we specified work correctly. We only want to trigger the add logic once the user presses enter and both fields are populated. So we verify that enter was pressed by checking the key code value on the event. We also check that an amount was specified as well as the description. Okay, so when our validation passes, we just push the new item to the array we already have on scope. Let's check this out. Looks good so far, but there are a couple of things to worry about here. Firstly, notice when I add the second item, it's actually overwriting the item below. And when I try to add it by pressing enter, we get this error in the console. That's because the code added a reference to the item on scope directly to the array and not a copy of that item. Secondly, when we refresh, the new item is gone, so it's not being saved to the DB. No surprises there, I hope. So let's go fix that. This code is going to become a bit more complex, a bit too complex for a controller. So let's move the add logic to the budget item service we used to get the values in the first place. I'm just going to act like we've already got an add function on here and call it. In the service, we introduce the add function. But hang on, before we do anything else, I want to pull an underscore because we'll use it soon. In the terminal, we use bar to install underscore for us. We add a reference to underscore in the index.html file. Okay, so now we can resume fleshing out the add functionality in the budget item service. We want to show the new item as soon as possible on the screen, but we don't even have access to the array containing the items in here. Our getAll function returned the promised result of the HTTP call, so this service never stores the result for itself. Let's hook into its success and make sure that we've got a reference to the values that came back from the service. Promises are made to be chained, so if we just return the value from our success, the next success in the chain will have access to the same variable instance. Perfect for our scenario. Okay, so now we've got access to the array, we can add our item to it, allowing our Angular view to bind to it as quickly as possible. Remember, our view didn't work so well when adding an item earlier, so we need to create a clone of this item as our first action in this function. This is why we pulled in underscore. Now we can push this clone to the array, after which we reset the values on the prototype item. We do this so that the input items on the view can be cleared. Let's see what it looks like in the browser. When we add a first test item, it works fine, and adding a second item also works fine. Cool. But it's obviously not saving to the DB yet. To start saving it to the DB, we just act like we've got this route already available on the server, then we'll go and add it soon. Let's copy this get route and adapt it for adding. We'll create this route handler next up. Let's copy the route handler for our get logic and adapt it for adding an item. We call create on our mongoose model and pass in the body from the request object. At this point, this contains our deserialized budget item. On success, we want to return the JSON for this newly created item. Let's see what it looks like in the browser. Okay, we're adding the first item, and the server responds exactly like we hoped it would. What the heck, let's add a second item. As you can see here in RoboMongo, the items have been saved to the DB. The user experience when adding items is a bit abrupt. Luckily, we can make it a bit more elegant using Angular and CSS animations. We first have to ensure that we've got the Angular RowAnimate module installed, which we do with bar in the terminal here. We need to remember to add a reference to this file in the index.html file. We also need to inject the ngAnimate module into our apps module. In our view, we just specify the RowAnimate class on the ally we repeat for each item. Cool, it's working. But how? Well, let me show you the CSS. I had to specify a rule that combines the class name we just added to the ally, RowAnimate, with the class name that Angular adds onto the items when they are first bound, called ngEnter. Then it just uses normal CSS3 transitions from there. Let's increase the duration on this to make it a bit easier to spot. There! You can see the animation took a bit longer that time around. And that's it for this screencast. The mean stack is extremely powerful and takes very little work to do something end to end. See you next time!